Well, today we get to interview a really fun guest. He has experience as a collegiate coach who turned his training and abilities from the athletic world, from basketball, into also business coaching, who's also a certified coach through the John Maxwell team. I want to welcome to the Whole Person Podcast, Jamy Beckler. Jamy, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Evan, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me. Great show. You've had some great guests. And so I guess this week you're taking a week off. You're going on vacation and having not a great guest. But I appreciate you having me on the show.
Right. Well, man, I guess I shouldn't say right. You're a great guest, and I love that you reached out to me. And, it looks like you have some really awesome guests on your show as well. And just, to kick it right off, you have a podcast called, I'm pulling it up here. It's the Success is a Choice podcast. And so you've had some really, really awesome guests. So I for you to say that, for me, I appreciate it. But man, you're killing it.
Well, it's always Teddy Roosevelt says comparison is the thief of all joy. And so, we were talking a little bit offline, and, you're asking me about some of my guests, and I'm looking at your guest list and like, man, I'd like to have some of those people on my guest list. We always are comparing. It's like, hey, I went to a conference a couple of years ago, or I was speaking at a conference, and I had a little booth, out in the lobby or whatever, selling some books and talking to people. And there was someone, it was in my space doing the same thing kind of next to me. And I was like thinking to myself, man, she's got a pretty cool booth. Like I need to do some of the stuff she's doing with hers. And she came up to me a little bit later that afternoon, and she was like, Jamy, I just want to let you know, I love the way that you formatted your booth. And I love the way your table is set up, and you got these banners and all this stuff. I really need to do that with mine. And so we were both thinking, envious of the other one. And I think that's the society we live in. Sometimes we see all these Instagram highlights or Facebook or Twitter highlights of people, and we want what they have. And, we just compare all the time. But I do appreciate you mentioning the podcast. It's been fun. And we've had some guests that I've enjoyed interviewing and listening to.
For sure. I've had a guest who, really admired my library here, and it's like, man, I really wish I had one of those. And I was like, dude, it's a green screen. So just to let you know, I don't own this. It's just a photo. So you're right, though. We do oftentimes get into this place where we compare where we're at to where other people are. And both you and I have had great guests. Someone who I tried to get on my show and they turned me down was Rachel Cruz. And so, for the fact that you have her, I was like, man, how'd you do that? And number one, I'm happy for you. And two, I'm like, okay, now how can I do that? And so many times we try to, like you said, compare ourselves. So how do we go from letting comparison steal our joy to using comparison as a way of like, all right, he did it. How can I leverage what I have to also do that?
Yeah. One of the things about the comparison thing is we're not satisfied, or we don't want to be complacent in life, but sometimes we're not satisfied with some of the stuff that we've done, and we're not, I tell this with my 10-year-old all the time. He'll be like, well, so-and-so, it's the age old thing. Well, so-and-so's doing this at school, or so-and-so's doing that at school. And back when we were growing up, our moms would be like, yeah, well, if they jumped in a lake, would you all jump in a lake? Or if they jumped off a cliff, would you jump off a cliff, or something like that, stupid like that. Where everybody compares and everybody wants what somebody else has. And sometimes the grass isn't greener on the other side, or if it is, it's because it's fake grass. It's that AstroTurf or artificial turf type stuff. But sometimes when the grass is greener on the other side, it's also because we're not watering our side. A lot of times we'll compare our reality of life to other people's highlights, and everybody on social media is putting out their highlights, putting out the best of, this is the best of album. And we look at that and we're like, man, I've got to have that. Or man, my life just stinks. And the thing is, maybe our life doesn't stink. Maybe we're just not gracious. We're not showing an attitude of gratitude for what we do have. Or the other part of that is maybe our life isn't very good, but it's because we're spending so much time focused on other things or other people. You mentioned Rachel Cruz. Rachel Cruz and her dad, Dave Ramsey, financial experts,
Yeah, they're juggernauts.
Yeah, but they have this saying, and Rachel Cruz says it too, but mainly it's Dave Ramsey saying, we buy things with money we don't have. We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't even like. Right. We're constantly worrying about people's opinions who we don't even respect their opinions. We don't care. So I kind of went off on a tangent there, but a lot of times the comparison thing, just water your own grass. Don't look at the grass being greener on the other side. Spend time watering your own grass. And, I've been there, Evan, just like you. I've been turned down by people. I've been turned down by friends. I'm like, why would you not come on my show? I don't understand. Or I've been turned down by, I don't make a list of the people that have turned me down, and publicize it, but I've been turned down by people and I'm like, wait a minute, but this person came on and this person came on and this person came on. Who are you? Like, you're a nobody compared to these people, but they came on the show. Why would you turn me down? Right. But you know what? Everybody is at a different place in life. Maybe they didn't turn me down. Maybe they just weren't able to work it out, or maybe they're not doing interviews right now, or maybe they just aren't a podcast person. There's a lot of things. And so I try not to take much personally. And I'm just like, I roll on, water off a duck's back, so to speak.
Right. Well, talking about watering your own grass, one of the things that I like to look at is people who are at a place in life where I want to be and learn from some of the things that they've done. And so I don't want comparison to be a thief of joy, and sometimes it is, but I also want comparison to be like, okay, this is how you did it. How can I not reinvent the wheel, but R&D, which is rip off and duplicate?
Well, yeah, I think, even you mentioned I was in college athletics. I was a college basketball coach for about 20 years. And, college athletics, college basketball coaches, we're always sharing ideas, but we're also stealing ideas. We're taking bits and pieces and making things our own, because you don't need to recreate the wheel if someone else is doing something well and you just try to copy that and maybe make it better. Maybe make it a little bit better, but you take bits and pieces. That's why people go to conferences. That's why people go to conventions. That's why people listen to podcasts. Why they read books is they want to expand their mind. They want to grow and develop and improve as a person or in their industry professionally. And so we're always trying to, you read books. You had Angela Duckworth on, let's say, she wrote Grit. It's a great book. There's been other great authors that have written great books. Not every single line and every single word in Angela Duckworth's book is 100% her brain was the first brain to think of that concept or that word or that sentence. We're this big amalgamation, this big conglomerate of experiences and people that we've met and things that we've done in our culture and things we've learned. And we put all that stuff together and we become who we are. And then we constantly are trying to learn. And so, I love that. What'd you say? Rip off and duplicate?
Yeah. R&D.
Yeah, R&D, rip off and duplicate. But yeah, you try to take something that someone else is doing and apply it to your own life. How does that fit into your life? And then make it better, make your life better with that. We don't have to all go around recreating the wheel. And we certainly don't need to all go around making the same mistakes. Life is way too short to make all the mistakes ourselves. I would much rather watch the mistakes Evan makes or watch the mistakes, so-and-so makes and learn from that than have to make all the mistakes myself.
So talking about mistakes, you were a college basketball coach for a while and the most winning coach in your school's history. The people that listen to the podcast and even myself, we might not be leading other people at the moment in terms of being a coach or have multiple employees, stuff like that. But we do have to learn to lead ourselves. So how did you go about learning to lead yourself so that you could be effective in creating game plans and strategies for success with your basketball team, and how you would apply that question into a personal life and business?
Yeah, great question. And through the years, this started essentially when I was in middle school, having great mentors or great coaches. I never called them mentors then. I didn't know what that word meant in middle school, but that's what they were. I just didn't necessarily know that. But great coaches, great people that I looked up to, and they helped get the best out of me. They helped make me and tried to push me or inspire me to be the best that I could be. And then through the years, I've just developed that even more and more and more. But I learned self-discipline. Part of that is I learned that from my parents. My parents, are the cliche, American dream, or the cliche worked their tails off, worked hard, well-respected. They never asked for anything, and, they weren't afraid to work. And to do that, to have that mentality, you have to have self-discipline, because there's a lot of other things you'd rather be doing than working hard or doing extra. Come early, stay late, do a little bit extra. Well, that's not for someone that's not self-disciplined. And so I learned those things, even though I didn't exactly know what I was learning. I learned some of those things as I was coming up and getting older. And then as I got into college, as I got into coaching, I tended to put words to that, phrases to that. This is what that really meant when I was doing that. But self-discipline is huge. And understanding that if you want to be the best that you can be, there's great motivational speakers out there and there's great coaches that can motivate. But really, at the end of the day, if I don't want to be coachable or if I don't want to be motivated, Tony Robbins can't stinking motivate me if I don't want to be motivated, or anyone else that's out there. And I think sometimes, I think Tony Robbins is like, right up there on the upper echelon of motivational speakers. And there's other ones, John Maxwell, who you mentioned in the intro, a great leadership guy. Some of these people I feel like could almost sell ice to Eskimos sometimes, but at the end of the day, that Eskimo had to want to buy ice. We have to want to be motivated at some point to give in to that motivation, those motivation tactics. So anyways, what I'm saying is I had to realize that, I want to achieve certain things, and to achieve certain things, I have to give up or I have to sacrifice.
Okay. So we're talking about motivation and discipline. What are some of the characteristics that a person has to have to start becoming more disciplined? Because let's go into detail with that. And then the follow-up question to that is, what are some of the basics to discipline?
I think you have to know where you want to end up. We call it goals, or, sometimes we'll call it New Year's resolutions, we'll say resolutions or whatever. However you want to say it, where do you want to end up? When we get in our car behind the wheel and we start driving somewhere, most of us know where we want to end up. We're not just driving aimlessly. Well, in life, we probably shouldn't be just going through life on this journey, just aimlessly not knowing where we want to go, because we won't know if we ever get there. We won't know, how to get anywhere. And so I think we have to figure out, where do we want to get to, and then reverse engineer, work backwards a little bit. What are the steps that are going to take me to get to that place? So, for me, let's say I wanted to be a head college basketball coach by the age of 32. That was my goal. And so I said, if I do this, and this, then that's going to put me in a position to succeed. And I actually did better. I was a head college coach at the age of 27. But I sacrificed completely for 5 years. In 5 years, my first 5 years of being an assistant coach, I got paid $36,000. Literally $36,000 in 5 years of being an assistant coach. And
not per year. That's total.
No, total. total. In 5 years, I made $36,000 total. I spent pretty much every waking hour. And when I say every waking hour, like I would go home, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, get up at 5, go back into the office. So I was sleeping 5 hours a night, maybe 6 if it was special night.
So as a basketball coach, you're going to like what I'm about to say then. I was really privileged to talk to Mark Cuban yesterday for about 5 minutes. And I talked about, how does someone in his position have balance? How did you create balance in your life? And he said, because I lived the first half of my life out of balance. He's like, I coded nonstop. I worked nonstop. And then I would hang out maybe a little bit with some friends. And then, I went through a lot of relationships is what he told me. And when they gave me ultimatums between them and my business, I said, well, we're breaking up. And he talked about how he had to be first out of balance and really hardcore in an area. And then when he reached the level of success, then he could become more well-rounded. And I said, well, that's great, but how do I apply this in my life? Because, I have a marriage of 10 years. I have 3 kids, so I can't go do that. He goes, well, then what you need to do is just put your family first in all things. And then everything else revolves around them. And that was a very aha moment for me. So when you were going through this process, it sounds like you decided to live out of balance a little bit to create your goal, and you were in a position to do that. So tell me more about that. Yeah,
that's a great perspective, Evan. And, there's a couple things to unpack there. First of all, we talked about Dave Ramsey a little bit, and he also says, he says, live today like no one else so you can live tomorrow like no one else. Essentially, right. Sacrifice now so that you can live the life you want to live later on. But yeah, I honestly am not a big fan of the work-life balance phrase, the balance type thing, because I don't believe in balance in terms of it's going to be equal. Now, right. If you want to define balance a different way, but I think
harmony,
most people,
rhythm.
I think most people define it kind of, or they think of it as a balance, like it's 50-50. It's kind of, and I don't subscribe to that. The phrase right. I like is alignment. And now it's not.
I love that. I love that. I'm going to use that from now on.
Yeah, I forget who I stole it from. But I definitely
Zig Ziglar,
stole it.
I'm sure.
Well,
Zig Ziglar
or John Maxwell. But yeah, I don't think I've had an original thought in my head ever. It's all copied from smarter people than me, which is a lot of people. But alignment, it may not be the perfect phrase, but I like it because alignment to me doesn't mean that it's 50-50. It doesn't mean that you have a balance there, but everything that you're doing lines up with the other stuff. So like it complements with one thing complements to the other. It works together. These things work together. So you mentioned your wife and your family. I have a wife and I have a 10-year or 11-year-old son. And I had a wife and I had a son when I was coaching still. All right. Well, there were certain months of the year where she was going to be a basketball widow. She knew that I was going to see them maybe for an hour a day, maybe. I'm getting up before they're even awake, and maybe I'm going to come home for 1 hour just to put in an appearance. But then what I'm going to have to do is in May, in June, in July, man, I might only have 3 hours a day basketball. Like I'm going to spend all my time or the majority of my time with my family, and we're going to plan vacations. We're going to do all this kind of stuff. So there's going to be times when you're just absolutely nose to the grindstone. You are absolutely devoted to this so that you can put yourself in a position professionally so that you can experience now the 3 or 4 or 5 months where you can devote full time to your family. Now that necessarily is not, there might be some people rolling their eyes or scoffing at that. No, we can't do that. That's fine. It's not for everybody. That worked for me. I am not an expert at work-life balance or work-life alignment, but it's worked for our family.
Did you know, so this past Super Bowl, with Chiefs versus Patriots, Tom Brady basically asked his family to leave the house for 2 weeks. Did you know that?
I heard that. But I don't have a problem with that, because I do think, going back to, what your goal is, what do you want? What's most important to you? What is most important to you should be more important than what you want right now. Like right now, I might want a Diet Coke and a Kit Kat, or right now I might want to sleep in all day. Well, but if the thing I want most in life is to lose 30 pounds, then I probably shouldn't be having a Kit Kat. Like what I want most should be more important than what I want right now. And maybe I want to sleep in all day, 5 days a week, because I'm an entrepreneur and I can do whatever I want, Well, if I sleep in all day long and put in very few hours, eventually I'm not going to be an entrepreneur anymore. I'm just, instead of being self-employed, I'm going to be unemployed. So what you want most has to take precedence over what you want now, but you have to figure out, are the goals, are what am I doing today? Are my actions, are my thoughts, are my behaviors, are they on par with my goals or what I want tomorrow? So what I'm doing today, is it going to help me get to what I want tomorrow and the next day and the next day? And so if you don't even know where you want to end up, then you're going to have a problem with that. Me, I wanted to be a head coach at the age of 27. So every waking hour, I was going to put in the time, but I was also going to think like a head coach. I was going to be the right-hand man to my head coach. I was going to be there all the time, because I want to see exactly how his day is. I want to be the trusted guy. All right, if my job responsibilities were this, this, and this, well, I was going to try to do this, this, and this over here, so that I could learn as much as possible. Hey, you know what? The managers don't have to do laundry. I'm going to do laundry. Hey, coach, you want me to drive you? You want me to drive you somewhere so we could just talk? I was going to do whatever it took to prepare myself to be a head coach. And that's the same way with anything. It doesn't have to be college athletics. What do you want? And then figure out, all right, what did the most successful people do to get to those positions? And so, you just commit yourself to it. And, everything that I did focused on that. I mean, shoot, on my honeymoon, and this is back in the dark ages when you don't have cell phones, and back when I was an assistant coach, there's no cell phones, it's back in the days when you have paper maps, no GPS. And if you're late for an appointment, you got to stop at a gas station, find a payphone, and try, hopefully, to get somebody on the other end, which makes you even later, because you had to stop at a gas station to find a payphone. Well, on my honeymoon, I'm checking in with the coach every day. Now, yeah, my wife and all the things that go into the honeymoon is really, really fun. And yeah, that's a nice time and a nice vacation, but I'm not a head coach yet. My goal is to be a head coach. And so I'm checking in even on honeymoon. I'm solving problems. I'm calling recruits even on my honeymoon.
Interesting. You have to have a strong desire to reach your goal and be willing to sacrifice some of the things in your present. What does it look like when things get spread too thin?
Yeah, and that's been a problem. That was a problem for me my first couple of years of being an entrepreneur. I've been self-employed or an entrepreneur in the leadership consulting space for about 4 years, a little over 4 years. In my first 2 years, I kind of looked at that as being a graduate assistant as a basketball coach, like you're learning the trade, like speaking, writing a book, writing blog posts. The content part of it, that's kind of easy in what I do. Like, I mean, some people would be like, writing a book's not easy. Well, okay, but the content part is kind of easy.
Right.
Running a business is the hard part. How do you make money when you sleep? How do you make money when COVID-19 hits? How do you make money in these different areas? Well, so that's hard to do. Well, the first couple of years, I was spreading myself too thin. I was trying to be everything to everybody. I'm going anywhere to speak if they're going to pay me. But if I have to go, I'm on the East Coast. If I go to the West Coast, and it takes a couple days, travel wise or preparing wise for a speech or whatever, even though they're paying me, that that might be a total of 3, 4, 5 days I spent traveling or preparing. Well, that might have nothing to do with my main goal. Like if my main goal is to get this book published or to do this in 3 months, well, this speech, all it might do is pay the bills for that week, which, yeah, we want to pay bills, but ultimately I would rather sacrifice a couple short-term things for the long-term. And so I was spread out way too thin. So I'm trying to speak to, people that build planes, plane parts. I'm trying to speak to banks. I'm trying to speak to fraternities and sororities. And I'm trying to speak all these places, and I'm trying to be this and be that. And I realized after 2 years that I was no closer to my goal of being, whatever my goal was in the sports area. I was no closer to that. I had just been able to tread water and make money the last 2 years, but I really got no closer to my goal of writing a book, of having a podcast, or all these things.
Interesting. In terms of, and I had a really good question, and then I wanted to be attentive, and so then I forgot it. Dang it!
Well, that just says I talked too long. I should have had this feeling, this Jedi mind. I should have picked up on that you had a great question. So
I should. Next time I'll just interrupt.
Just put your finger up, or. All
right, hold on. I'm going to
just give me the hand. Just give me the hand. Tell me to stop.
Perfect. I'm going to give me 1 second to think about it. Okay. So we were talking about spreading yourself out too thin, discipline. Okay, here we go. So in terms of flying across country and choosing where to speak for what money, it sounds like a big part of the process is learning how to make effective decisions. And so how do you get better at making effective decisions? Told you it was good.
Hard. Yeah, it's good because it's a hard question to answer because so much of it comes down to that self-discipline, doing what you have to do when it has to be done as well as you can possibly do it, and then do it that way all the time, essentially would be how I define discipline. But what is it that's most important to you? And, hey, I want to, okay, I'll circle back. I'll give you an example that happened to me just a couple weeks ago. I have published some books for people. Some people that I know, I've published their books. I produced their books for them. They've written a manuscript and I've actually got it published, produced for them. Well, one of those people was so grateful. She has a podcast. She wanted to promote me on the podcast for producing books, publishing books. She's like, yeah, I have a bunch of people that I'm sure would want to do this. Okay, that would be short-term money. That would be money if she was successful in promoting me, which she probably would have been. I would have gotten clients to produce their books, and my business manager would have loved that extra money. And my business manager being my wife, she would have loved the little extra income that would come with that. But the amount of time, I turned my friend down, even for the free publicity, because the amount of time that I would have invested in that would have kept me from working on my membership site that we just rolled out. It would slow up my book production, my next book I'm writing. It would have put me completely back on all those things. Even though my bank account would have had a little bit more money short term, the long term effects would set me back. And so that's just one little example. But sometimes we have to just be disciplined and not take the bite of the apple, to not take what's right there in front of us, even though it looks good. It's not about good and bad sometimes. It's sometimes just about short-term good versus long-term really, really, really good. And so I've had to, it's been a journey for me. It's been a process because, like I said, my first couple of years, I'm speaking everywhere. I'm writing whatever. I'm doing whatever I can to just get exposure or to make money, as opposed to having a really good set plan. And so now I'm pretty focused in on, there's only 3 things that I'm doing pretty much every day. And I'm focused on those things. How does this relate to this? Does this relate to this? And if it doesn't, then we're going to have to put it on the back burner.
What advice would you give to someone to help narrow down what they're doing? So, I mean, let's just take me, for example. Okay. So I feel like I have a lot going on in my life, a lot of opportunity, more opportunity right now than I've ever had in my life. And I've basically said yes to them all. And now I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Okay. So one, I have a possibility of working towards owning a real estate brokerage. The other part is starting a ministry, which I've always wanted to do ever since I was young. And then I am also in the process of creating a network of podcasts called Calvary Cast and some communities around that. I have my own podcast and YouTube channel, as well as another podcast community. Oh, and now I added this new thing called Fireside, and I'm a founding creator on that. And so I have a lot going on. And I've learned to delegate some of the things in my life to other people that I've hired to. So I'm already doing that. But I don't want to let go of any of those things because they're all within the center of my dream, and they can all work really well with one another. It's just that they've all come at me at once. And so I'm like, okay, I can't say no to this because these are all the things I'm wanting to build my life around.
Yeah, that's a great question. And unfortunately, we've talked about Dave Ramsey. I'm not good like Dave Ramsey. I can't hear an issue and give you a 1 minute, solve your problems in 1 minute. Yeah, he's really good at that. But what I would say in general, there's a couple things as I hear, Evan, and fill in the blank, your A, B, C, D, E, F, G issues are similar to what most people are going through. They're just different issues or different things that are coming their way. One of the things that we struggled with, or I struggled with, was, man, I want to do all these things. FOMO, fear of missing out, or I just don't want to let it ride. I want to do it now. This is part of my goal, part of my dream. I think sometimes we forget that we're on a continuum. We're on this journey. And it doesn't mean that if I choose not to do this now, it will never get done. It's just we can postpone. We can schedule things out. I like to think of it as we're scheduling. So maybe you take, X thing, Y thing, and Z thing is what you focus on for these next 3 months. And you really go all in with those and you nail it. And then you're going to hit these other things the next 3 months or the next 6 months, or, if you want to go quarters like a business, or if you want to go even a year, this year, this is going to be my focus and I'm going to kill this thing. I'm going to slam dunk it. It's going to be awesome. And then I'm going to get that rolling so well that I can offload it a little bit. You talked about delegating. That's awesome. I'm going to delegate this a little bit. And then I'm going to focus on this thing, not forgetting the other thing. And they're going to complement one another. But now I got this rolling. So it actually gives me momentum to springboard into this other thing. And so it's not a thing where I'm choosing this over this and the other thing that I chose against never gets done. It can be. Now, if I'm talking to Evan and Evan's 90 years old right now, yeah, you know what? You're probably not going to get to some of that stuff. You're probably going to die before you get to all those goals. We don't know the hour that we're going to die. All right. If we're relatively young and the numbers are in our favor, well, then we can plan stuff out, quite frankly, take a risk, plan stuff out. You don't have to do everything now. You can do something, but you don't have to do everything now. And I know that sounds really trite or generic, but I think sometimes the generic stuff or the philosophy of the stuff we forget about. I don't have to do all 7 things that I want to do right this minute. I can focus on one thing right this minute. As a basketball coach, okay, I know not all of your listeners are sports people, but as a basketball coach, yes, your team, you want your team to be good at shooting. You want them to be good at dribbling. You want them to be good at passing, at rebounding, at defense, all these things. You want them to be good at all those things, but it's impossible to get all 15 of your players to be good at every area of basketball. And so sometimes you have to pick and choose. You only have 2 hours of a practice or an hour and a half of a practice. What are we going to spend our time on today? And if you try to do every single thing, if everything is a priority, then actually nothing ends up being a priority. So sometimes you have to have an emphasis or a focus of the day as a basketball coach. That's the same way with an entrepreneur or in life. What am I focused on today? What is that thing? And I don't agree with everything in Tim Ferriss's book, 4 Hour Work Week, but there's a lot of theory. There's a lot of insights in that book that I think we can apply. And one of the things I remember is he would talk about, if you only had 2 hours in a day, you only had 2 hours to work. It didn't matter if you worked 8 hours, you only had 2 hours. What would you do in that 2 hours? What's the most important thing? Or if you could only fit it on the size of a Post-it note, what would you do? Or, we think about sometimes when we go on vacation, right before we go on vacation, we get some of the most stuff done because we're super uber focused on getting, these are the priority things I have to get done because I'm going to be gone for a week. So a lot of us have that ability in us to uber focus. And so we just have to write it down. Just write the stuff down.
So, let me ask you this, because as you're talking, I'm getting, plan according to the priorities that are most important. I think as you're talking, what I realized is I have things that I want to do versus things that I need to do. And I often let what I want to do override the things I need to do.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Like I would much rather post something on Twitter than cold call somebody to try to buy my product who I think is going to turn me down anyways. Or I would rather, talk to an existing client who loves me or an existing coach that loves my stuff than talk to a person that's disgruntled. We always want, that's just human nature. But that's where I do think when we write it down sometimes, just make columns, even pros and cons or benefits and, a cost benefit analysis or just wants and needs, short-term, long-term. I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs and I was the same way my first couple of years. It's like, well, maybe I should get a part-time job so I still have some money coming in, so I can do my part in the family, while we're trying to get this business going. Well, but that might pay a couple bills, a couple internet bills, but that doesn't help you in being an entrepreneur. It just helps you tread water. It doesn't help you get to the shore. It doesn't help you swim to shore and get to where you want to go. So sometimes we just have to write it out.
How do you tread water versus, like you said, going to the shore? But if you don't tread water, you'll also drown.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, but here's what, and we'll go down this rabbit hole of analogy and I'm a king of bad analogies. I would say, first of all, you should have had a life jacket. You should have taken a life jacket with you. You shouldn't be out in the water without a life jacket or some flotation device. So you don't have to only tread water by yourself. So if we want to use a terrible analogy, that would be it, is that we should have planned ahead. And so we might have planned badly the last 2 years. It doesn't mean today we can't start planning better for the future. There still might be some consequences to our choices or bad planning, but we can start to make good choices today. And so I would say on the treading water analogy, take a life preserver with you, have something with you. So if you go out in that boat, you better have a flotation device so you don't have to tread water as much. So plan a little bit better. What can I do? Write it out. I know it's old school. I'm not even saying on a computer. I'm saying old school, take a pencil with an eraser, write stuff out, or a pen, whatever, cross things out, do it on a whiteboard. If you got a whiteboard, I have a couple of whiteboards in my office and I plan some stuff out. I write things down because I want to visually see that and I want to think through things. So I sit down, take a few extra minutes. It's like those old to-do lists or, take some extra time on Sunday night, take 15 minutes on Sunday night to figure out what you got to do the next week and it'll save you time, that kind of stuff. Now, I'm not a time management expert. Okay. I dabble. I know just enough to make me dangerous, but I'm not an expert at time management. But I do know that if you're not planning, then you're putting yourself at a huge disadvantage because you're not going to know where you're trying to get to. If you just wake up, and you're like, well, I'm just going to handle whatever calls or emails come in. Well, that's treading water. Okay. Right. You're just reacting. How am I going to be proactive? All right. These are the 7 calls I have to make today. These are the 2 things that when I lay my head on the pillow tonight, if I didn't get these done, then I didn't advance our business. Like, it didn't get better. It could be, hey, I have to either make money today or I have to sign a contract today. Either money had to come into my account today or I had to make a sale with a PO or an invoice where the money will come in eventually. But I have to make so much money every day. That could be your goal. And I'm going to make as many calls or many emails as possible. Whatever you have to tell your, we've talked about Dave Ramsey, Financial, Rachel Cruz a lot, but they talk about budgets and no one likes to talk about budgets. Budgets are really just telling your money where it's going to go, as opposed to just all of a sudden at the end of the month, I realize I don't have any money left. A budget is telling your money where it's going to go. It doesn't mean you can't spend money. People with budgets spend a lot of money. They just know where they're going to spend the money. Well, it's the same way as an entrepreneur. If you had to tell your time where it's going to go, how am I going to use my time today? And if you're not doing it like a budget, then all of a sudden you're going to get 2 years down the road and you're going to have to go get a 9-to-5 job again because you haven't done a good job of planning and knowing where you're trying to get to. You're just trying to play entrepreneur, play this great self-employed thing, but you're not making any money or you're not progressing toward your goal. And so,
man, that's awesome.
Yeah. But I've learned some of those things the hard way too. It's not, right. I mean, I say this, I'm not a millionaire. I say this, I haven't arrived. I've screwed up a lot. And my wife has threatened me a lot with, hey, you're going to have to go get a real job if you don't get this done or if you don't do this. And I'm like, okay, yes, ma'am. So sometimes you do have to get refocused and have kind of a wake up call.
Well, Jamy, I like to end each show with the same 3 questions. First being, in the terms of negative self-talk, what do you currently struggle with?
I tend to be fairly self-aware. It doesn't mean that I change the things that are bad about me or that I correct those, but I tend to be self-aware. I can pick out all my negative flaws most of the time. So sometimes I will have definitely negative talk. But the main thing that I struggle with, we talked about it today actually, is discipline. Now I tend to think that I'm more disciplined than a lot of people, but I also hold myself into, I'm not as disciplined as I used to be. I was just talking to a lady yesterday on a podcast, and we were talking about my discipline as an athlete and what I did with my body to be a great athlete. And I'm like, gosh, I don't do any of that stuff anymore. And she's like, well, you would do that if you were an athlete again. And I'm like, well, I'd hope to think so. But yeah, sometimes I get mad at myself or I call myself names because I'm not disciplined. I'm drinking a diet soda right now. And I know I should not drink that. And I'm not supposed to be drinking pop right now. Soda, for half of your listeners, they might not even know what pop is, but you shouldn't be drinking pop.
If you said pop?
I'm originally from Michigan. I live in Ohio.
Okay. I grew up pop. I grew up in Kansas. When I moved to Oklahoma, it's soda. And so
I was in the South for a long time and they called it Coke. And it's like, you want a Coke? I'm like, no, I don't like Coke. And they're like, well, but you can have other kinds of Coke. And I'm like, well, I don't like cherry Coke either. No, like you want a Sprite or you want a Mountain Dew? I'm like, that's not Coke. So that's funny. Yeah, it's different everywhere.
In terms of peace, I know a lot of people struggle with finding real peace and not artificial peace. What brings you peace?
Yeah, when I know that I've done the best that I was capable of doing. I know that can kind of sound trite a little bit. I've always looked at success as kind of just having the peace of mind that you've done the best you can do. So did I do better than Evan? Did Evan do better than me? I don't know, but I did as well as I could do. So today, did I do what I could do today to help my business, to help my family, to be a better husband, a better dad, a better business person? And if I did, then I can kind of have peace that when I lay my head down on the pillow, that I had a good day.
And then in the last question, what is the best decision you've ever made?
Oh, that's absolutely an easy one, because she's over there in the next room watching me, but marrying my wife.
Okay,
my
outside
wife,
of marrying your wife,
you're the best decision, the best thing to ever happen to me. You make me want to be a better man.
Well, it's true. I mean, don't get me wrong, but let's move past that, because that's a surface level answer as well. While it's true, what's the best decision you've ever made?
It's like in Sunday school, every answer is Jesus.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes I sometimes tell people it can't be Jesus and it can't be your spouse.
Yeah. What's your favorite book? Bible. Okay. All right. We see where this is going. Yeah.
Yeah. You're one of those people who can't give me an honest answer. Right?
I'll give you another kind of an easy answer to this, but it's easy. It's not actually easy, but it was a simple answer. And that's the adoption of our son, Jalen. We adopted him. He's 11. We adopted him at birth. And people would be like, yeah, that's pretty easy. And it wasn't easy because I didn't want kids. And I've actually written articles about this. I didn't want kids, really. I fought my wife on kids, but I allowed her to get her way. But in retrospect, that was the best. That was amazing. It's one of those great things that I'm so glad. I just was so focused on being a basketball coach. I didn't want anything to get in the way of that. And definitely kids can get in the way of your career.
Right.
Especially if you're conflicted about being a good dad. If there's any part of you that wants to be a good dad, boy, it's really tough.
To be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Anything. Pretty much, if you want to be really good professionally, but you also want to be a good dad, it's tough. That's why people get paid millions of dollars to talk about work-life balance and help you be a better father or a better mother. Right. It's tough. But that is simple. To say that adopting Jalen was the best thing that we've ever done. That's simple to say. It was easy. It was not easy to do because I had my career mindset, but that in retrospect has been awesome. Now I will say, 11 years ago, I'm dumb as a parent now. 11 years ago, I was an expert at parenting. I don't know where that's gone. I used to be great at parenting other people's kids, and now I'm not very good at parenting.
Right. Well, Jamy, thank you so much for coming on our show today. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
The best way is if they're a twit, they can get on Twitter and find me at Coach Beckler, at Coach Beckler. And then my website is
Spell it because it's not the way it sounds.
Coach Beckler, it looks like Bechler. So Becler, Coach Beckler. And it's coachbeckler.com as well. But they could probably Google me and find that kind of stuff. But they can find books. They can find them by podcast. But we try to keep things positive on Twitter. They won't know my favorite sports team. They won't know what I've eaten. They won't know where I'm vacationing. They won't know they won't know who I voted for in any election. We try to put out positive insights that are going to help people in their life.
Right. So who is your favorite sports team?
Yeah, they would not know that I'm a big Michigan Wolverine fan.
Gotcha.
You wouldn't know necessarily that.
Well, I figured because you were from that area.
Yeah. It's just, I'm a big fan of all sports and all teams. I like coaches. I like players that are good leaders more so than even teams.
Right. Yeah. I'm the same way.
Yeah. And I play a lot of fantasy football or fantasy sports also. So you tend to root for players sometimes than just the teams. But yeah, I tend to like certain coaches, and I tend to like certain, I like the New England Patriots in football because they've been so good for so long. I like the San Antonio Spurs or the Golden State Warriors in basketball, whether I like any of their players or not, because I like their organization.
I might become a Mavericks fan soon. I don't know yet.
Yeah, with you being best friends with Mark Cuban. No, having him interviewing him yesterday. That's cool. So, Yeah, and they run a great organization. He's done a great job for many years, and they've done a lot of things in social issues. He's not afraid to speak out, whether it's social issues or stuff for the NBA or officiating. But his players love him, and he goes to bat for him. This stems, probably 15, 20 years ago, he made a huge splash as an owner in free agency. And instead of throwing all this money at free agents, what he was doing was he was putting like PlayStations in their locker rooms and putting these nice plush towels in their locker rooms, in their lockers. And, those are things that those millionaires could have easily bought, but it was things that were convenient for them, because sometimes the millionaires, they have a lot of money in their bank account, but they don't all have the necessity or, these nice things. People like nice things. And so he was doing extra stuff for people that other people were taking for granted. Well, we don't have to do this stuff because they're rich. They can buy their own stuff. Well, sometimes, it's like when you see someone come get interviewed on a TV show, let's say, and you find out that they got a watch for being on that, or they got, a gift for being on the show. And it's like, well, they're rich. Why did they, why they can afford to buy it? Well, people like still to get gifts, even if you're rich, even if you're famous. And so he was kind of on that cutting edge he was on the forefront of, I'm going to treat people like people. I want them to feel like we're a family here, that like I care about them, not just about the money and business. So yeah, he's been doing things and players have loved him for years.
Awesome. Well, man, thank you so much for coming on the show today, and take care and have a great day.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, Evan.
See ya.